In his fascinating book, God's Smuggler, Brother Andrew tells how he secretly met with a small knot of Christians in Romania. It thrilled the people almost beyond words when he quietly slipped them some brand new Bibles. The Lord intervened literally hundreds of times in helping him get books through the barbed wire at the borders and the communist checkpoints. But Brother Andrew longed to actually communicate with the people that he brought those books to let them know that they weren't alone. Christians in the West hadn't forgotten them. In fact, Christians had contributed to send the Bibles. Believers in America and Amsterdam and London and Paris prayed every day for their isolated fellow believers in Romania. But how could he tell them? He didn't know any Romanian, and they didn't speak Dutch. Then all at once an idea flashed into his mind. Opening up his Dutch Bible, he pointed them to 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and then gestured down toward verses 19 and 20. They read in their own tongue, "The churches in the province of Asia send you greetings. Aquila and Priscilla greet you warmly in the Lord. And so does the church that meets in their house. All the brothers here send you greetings." Their eyes widened. Was this verse still true in the 1960s? Was Andrew really bringing greetings? Yes, he nodded, pointing to the verse again and gesturings. Excited now, they turned in their own Bibles and found Proverbs 25, verse 25, and pointed to it. Brother Andrew could figure out, even though he did not know Romanian, that the book was Proverbs. And in a moment, he read their reply. "Like cold water to a weary soul is good news from a distant land." And they went back and forth like that for a happy half hour together, laughing and pointing to verses and hugging each other. It all stemmed from the realization that other Christians existed in the world, brothers and sisters who cared. Even if they were being persecuted and spied on, they could know that prayers were going up on their behalf from the other side of the Iron Curtain. It couldn't prevent the body of Christ from reaching across to provide encouragement, to provide that cold drink of the water of Christian fellowship. We're all brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ. No matter who we are or where we are, we're connected to all the others. You know, I remember being in New Orleans and then in Indianapolis when Russian Christians, for our general conference, really first began to get clearance to travel to worldwide gatherings with other believers. It's much easier now, of course, but back then when the Iron Curtain was still up, well, you could see on their faces the growing reality that they were part of a family. Worldwide, these people care about us, they thought to themselves. Just as in Bible times, there existed an invisible networking that the KGB was powerless to break down. In a way that takes me again back to verse 2 of this marvelous PS chapter, chapter 16. In it, we find still another beautiful picture of brotherhood. Notice what Paul says about the collection for God's people. "Do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will be having to be made." Now, the money was for the poor churches in Jerusalem. Even though Christianity had begun in Palestine, the churches in places like Galatia and Corinth, well, they had more money. A Bible commentary by Leon Morris notes that Jerusalem wasn't a rich place. People struggled there. Generous Jews from outside Palestine often had to send gifts of money to relatives and friends. Would Christianity likewise provide for members in a needy place? It wasn't an iron curtain, but a barrier of economic destitution nonetheless. So Paul asks the Corinthians, how about it? The Galatian churches are helping. What about you? Notice a couple interesting points here. First of all, Paul encourages the believers to contribute in proportion to how God has blessed them. It's a principle we find woven throughout the Bible. The widow put her last 2 cents in the plate. Jesus commended her for it. But what a tragedy if wealthy people like Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea had put in just 2 cents each Sabbath. God expected more from them, and they came through. We give as God has blessed us. The second point is that in verse 2, Paul challenges his readers to come up to 100% participation. Each one of you, he exhorts them. Amazing things happen when every single one of us digs in and digs deep. A note in the Bible commentary states, if all believers today were to adopt this principle of systematic benevolence, there would be an abundance of means for speedily carrying the message of salvation to all the world. Some researchers suggest that about 1/3 of the world's population is Christian. Just imagine with me, what would happen if every single Christian, every man, every woman, every teenager, every senior citizen, every kid obeyed what Paul is saying here? If everyone took part and did what they could in accordance with how God is blessed, there'd be an explosion of generosity, a tidal wave of money, personnel, supplies, disaster relief resources, tutoring help, Bible study givers, funds mailed into radio ministries, missionaries sponsored. The list would go on and on and on. I think we have to link that with the concept over in verses 19 and 20, in which Paul talks about greetings and reaching out and give people a holy kiss. Can you glimpse in your imagination that teenager on the streets of Moscow? Maybe wearing a Michael Jordan t-shirt or a Pepsi logo on his or her cap. The kid became a Christian last year during an evangelistic meeting by an Adventist pastor or a Baptist team of workers, or a Youth for Christ tour by some Nazarene evangelical teenage musicians. The young person in Red Square is all of a sudden our brother or sister. Maybe he or she needs a Bible in the Russian language or Bible lessons, and it's going to take $40,000 to translate. He or she needs to hear Christian radio programs like our sister broadcast Voice of Hope. Maybe the family needs food during the upcoming winter months. Is the young person's Christian family here in the United States or Canada going to do what Paul is telling us to do? 100% participation. Everyone giving in accordance with how God has blessed. Leon Morris writes that just as the Jews helped their poorer brothers, so did the Greek religious brotherhoods, the Uranoi. It would never do for the Christians to lag behind the Jewish and pagan world in their care for their poorer members. End of quote. Now that almost sounds like a bit of a competitive spirit, and you know, I really don't mind. Shouldn't the Christian faith lead the way? Shouldn't the world notice whether we send our greetings, our dollars, our medical mission teams, our life-saving gospel publications and Bibles and television programs? Absolutely. At the same time, what we do turns around and has an impact on us. Do you remember the sheep and goats story that Jesus told in Matthew 25? One group went to the right, the other to the left. On what basis? Jesus asked people, whom do you help? Whom do you feed? Whom do you visit in prison? For whom did you sacrifice to be a blessing to? To whom did you send a Bible or give an offering? In fact, one commentary boldly states, our attitude toward the less fortunate members of society plays a large part in determining our ultimate destiny.